Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is intimacy, sort of continuing along the lines of our conversation about love and vulnerability. Today we'll talk about intimacy. So it should be really, hopefully, a stimulating and interesting conversation. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen just flooding into your lungs and flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells and your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant bright light lighting you up from the inside out, electrifying, energizing, and illuminating all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, and lighting you up and glowing into the world beyond. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, any remaining stress or negativity or fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and very softly, softly, softly rub your fingers against your palms and feel how delicious that sensation is, and bring yourselves present to your body right here, right now. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome, Andrea. So good to have you here with us this morning. And everybody else who's joining us, we are going to be speaking about intimacy this morning. And what is intimacy, and is it of necessity tied to vulnerability and risk, exposure? Like, is part of what defines intimacy as intimacy the vulnerability and openness of or that can leave us available to hurt. So we can, I see intimacy on a whole bunch of different levels, because it's interesting to me that good morning, Robert. Welcome. It's great to have you here. It's interesting to me that people can have intimate physical encounters and still not be intimate with one another. So there are physical expressions of intimacy, and there are emotional expressions of intimacy, and then there are expressions of intimacy that have to do with just sharing deeper parts of ourselves that doesn't necessarily lead to vulnerability. So because I think I want to look at that part first, because we've spoken about vulnerability and sharing our darkest secrets, etc. But the thing is that when we take ownership of our darkest secrets, it may be intimate information that we're sharing, but it doesn't necessarily leave us in a place where we are exposed to harm, because we've already come to a reconciliation about what those secrets are. We've become whole with it. We've integrated them. Good morning, Dennis. Wonderful to have you here. So we're talking about intimacy, and I know that, like, through my life, as I have come to places of self-acceptance, that I've been able to share parts of my history or my life or my perspective that that would be considered intimate, in terms of my vulnerabilities, right? And at the same time, because I have integrated my history with my current self, because I have come to self-acceptance around those things, although they may be intimate, it's not a pain point anymore. And when we find, I think that when we're complete with aspects of our history, of our being, etc., that we we're not exposed to the potential harm that could come from someone misusing that information, if that makes any sense. And maybe I'm dreaming, I don't know. But I find it interesting on the other side of the spectrum that people can have intimate relations with one another and be totally disconnected and not really being intimate at all in terms of sharing of themselves. So I'm wondering what the dynamic is around intimacy. Like, is part of, a lot of us fear intimacy, and the question that I have around that is why would we fear intimacy? And the obvious answer is what a friend of mine said, is that opens us up to a world of hurt, right? Where we may open our hearts and our lives to another, and then perhaps that intimacy comes to an end, or we end up being very disappointed or hurt at I think at what is often a lack of fulfillment of our expectations that we didn't even realize we had. So I think that part of intimacy, a big part of intimacy, is trust. And it's not always trust in the other. It's often and probably primarily trust in ourselves. Trust in ourselves to make judgments that of what is appropriate, what isn't, what is safe, what isn't. So many people that I know, including myself, have gotten into relationships, and then when the relationships have dissolved or exploded in some cases, felt a tremendous sense of shame and mistrust for themselves, for ourselves, because of misjudgments that we may have made, for misplaced trust, for instance, for not paying attention to the signs that were available to us, because we so wanted things to be different than the way they were. You know, perhaps we really wanted this person to be a certain way, or to believe a certain thing, or to be trustworthy in a certain way, and then we find that wasn't the case, and we had made assumptions perhaps based on our desire for intimacy, or our projections. We've been talking a lot about projections and expectations and such, and when an intimacy is violated, and I'm going to use that word violated because it does, when we open ourselves. Good morning, Jennifer. Welcome. Great to have you here. We're talking about intimacy and different degrees of intimacy, and risk and trust, and what the elements of intimacy are. When we trust another, and I think that this is when we often feel most violated, is when we trust another more than we trust ourselves, when we trust another to act a certain way, or behave a certain way, to speak a certain way, respond in a certain way, what we're doing first is we're projecting our values and our ideas and our assumptions on that person. But the thing is that we're often trusting them more than we trust ourselves. So, as an example, lots of us will, in a relationship, will get red flags, right? Um, and and depending upon perhaps how deep we are into the relationship, we may choose to overlook those red flags because we want the relationship so much. And what we're doing in that instance is we are violating our own knowing. And so what we're doing is not trusting ourselves. And I think that when there are failed relationships, especially if they've had an explosive kind of ending, the aftermath, the healing from that is often trying to heal from the violation of self by self more so than the other. You know, the other person does what they do, but we chose for ourselves not to pay attention or to overlook certain things. And my thinking is that when that happens, we do pay the price for it. And the lesson is to come back to self-trust. And in the context of a relationship, it's often good morning, Robin, so good to have you here. We're talking about intimacy and all different levels of intimacy, and what it means and what the barriers are to intimacy. So I think just to circle back around, that one of the biggest barriers to intimacy is fear of being hurt. And and this is a big if, but when we are able to maintain our connection to ourselves, to keep checking in with ourselves and our balanced heart, you know, our deepest intuition rather than our wants and desires and projections. It's hard, not necessarily an easy thing to do, to stay present to that balanced part of ourselves, that wholeness. You know, when we get in relationship, it's so interesting to see how, for instance, strong, independent women, self included, have found ourselves, and I imagine this is probably true for men in certain instances as well, have found ourselves kind of shifting the focus of our compass. And good morning, Josie. So good to have you here. We're talking about intimacy. And so when we get in relationships sometimes, and I don't imagine that this is just a female thing, but we lose our compass. And the energy and momentum of the relationship itself can help us to drift from our course, because we're integrating another person into that orbit, and the orbit shifts. And oftentimes I've seen this dynamic with a lot of powerful women who get in relationship where their partner is initially attracted to their strength and their power, and then the partner wants to dominate that and control that and contain that and squelch that. And so back to this notion of intimacy and what we find so frightening about it, or so intimidating in many cases, is the fear of perhaps losing ourselves and our clarity and our our independence. When so I guess a question that's arising for me is, can we have intimacy and independence cohabiting? Is it possible to maintain our true independence while in the context of being intimate? Good morning, Bernadette. We're talking about intimacy, trust, independence, vulnerability, exposure, all of that stuff. And with these questions, I think that it's an interesting paradox to recognize how so many people, again, I said it already, but I'll say it again, can be physically intimate and completely disconnected emotionally and maybe even intellectually. It's really, really interesting. So maybe there's a physical intimacy, there's an emotional intimacy, there's a spiritual intimacy and intellectual intimacy where the sharing of ideas can become a very synergistic and intimate experience. I'm wondering what for you defines intimacy. What is intimacy for you, and what level of vulnerability is attendant to that intimacy? It may be, that physical intimacy is so intimate that people find themselves being very self-protective emotionally, perhaps, or I think in a way that I've seen a lot of people use physical intimacy as a way to not be emotionally intimate. That it's a way to avoid the emotional intimacy that can be so raw and tender. And so I think this is really interesting, because the danger of intimacy, where does the hurt come from? Hello, Elaine. So I'm excited to read what you have to say. Welcome. It's great to have you here in this conversation about intimacy. So Elaine says, a lot of male energy have not yet learned how to coexist with a powerful woman. Yes, it's absolutely true. It threatens them. Most are not aware of this due to their own childhood issues and the lack of self-connection and self-love. So they try to gain it outside their self. Old conditioning. And we as women agreed to play this role to clear out our own disconnect from ourselves and lack of self-love. These are beautiful wake-up experiences. And I'm going to add, can be exceedingly painful and confronting. And oftentimes our greatest growth can come from extreme pain. It's unfortunate that that's the dynamic, but that's how it works a lot. So yes, thank you for that, Elaine. I think that that's really true. And I think there's such richness available in intimacy when there is when we can use that intimacy collaboratively. And so I don't know, intimacy, I don't think is an act of independence. I think intimacy is an act of connection, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Elaine says, pain is a beautiful teacher. Yes, and a stern teacher, for sure. I agree. And we get to choose the lessons we learn from pain, from being, I think what happens oftentimes is that we become disassembled when relationships fall apart. There's such a deep questioning and challenging of our beliefs and our perspectives that the pain of that deconstruction and rebuilding is very intense, and is like the fire that is curing the steel in the making of a sword, for instance. So Bernadette says, I think it depends on the partner's personality. If they want to be the giver, helper, etc., and are not allowed that choice because of a woman's independence, it makes them feel a lack of masculine traits of being the giver. That's a beautiful observation, Bernadette. Thank you for that. And so this goes back to our conversation on Monday, which is letting love in and being able to receive. And so many of us feel that we can't allow ourselves to receive because that makes us vulnerable, right? Or that puts us in a beholden position, or we just don't know how to receive. So many of us, male and female, I think. And so Elaine says, pain and fear have served me well. And I think, Elaine, the thing that elevates pain and fear to magnificent teachers is when we allow ourselves the opportunity to choose the gift that's available rather than holding on to the pain, and to transmute that pain and fear into revelation and transformation and awareness. And I think that takes an act of grace and an act of will, both. Good afternoon, Hope. It's so great to have you here. Welcome, welcome. So we're talking about intimacy and the pain and the fear and the trust and vulnerability, all of these things that are aspects of intimacy. And Elaine says, we are master souls. We came for this. I agree with you 100%. And I can also say that there were points in my life where I didn't think I would make it through the pain. The pain was so deep and devastating that it almost leveled me. And the fact that I didn't succumb to it, and that I found my way through, and I know this is so for so many of you, has given us greater wisdom and strength and learning. And it would be lovely if we could learn as effectively without all that pain. But that pain, like the fire curing the steel, when making a sword, for example, the fire strengthens, and that's what is giving us our resilience and our ability to be present for others. And so I love that you're saying this, Elaine. This is something I say all the time. When we realize that life is happening for you, not against you, then you can experience your experiences fearlessly, knowing it is for your best to expand your heart and to know yourself as only love. Yes. So I say it a little bit differently, but we say the same thing. And that is, life is not happening to us, it's happening for us and through us. And I agree that when we allow that, we have the ability to move with the circumstances of life, however painful or fearful they may be, to embrace that as the gift that we're giving ourselves in whatever that circumstance, even though we may not be able to decipher it in the given moment. So Elaine says, yes, life takes you to the death of what is not you. I have died 6 times in this life, so I know by which you speak, but it has served me well. And now you made a very provocative statement, Elaine, and I am tremendously curious. When you say you have died 6 times, do you mean that you have had 6 near-death experiences? Do you mean that you have been raised to the ground and re-emerged 6 times? I'm so curious, because I can say for myself, I have remade myself and my life at least 3 times. Yes, you have had 6 near-death experiences. My gosh, Elaine, we need you to write a book and make a movie, because that's pretty amazing. You're challenging the 9 lives of the cats. So I'm very curious, and you know, it is no wonder to me that no surprise to me that you have had that degree of otherworldly kinds of experiences, because it has moved you to a place of presence that is beyond what most of us experience in life, without those kinds of dramatic contrasts. Anyway, guys, I have an exciting appointment at, oh my God, Elaine, someone cut your throat? Holy mackerel. You know what? I would love to connect with you and just learn more about you. Let's figure out a time to connect, and I just want to hear your story. It's just such an extraordinary story. You know, and I can't wait to hear more if you're willing to share. Anyway, I have a really exciting appointment at 9:30. My last name, Lisa, I can just tell you guys, my last name is Rubin, Rubin. So I would love to hear from you, and I hope you're having a great vacation. Anyway, I get to run. I'm really excited. I love you. I am so grateful to you for this time and these connections and conversations. And yeah, let's take some time to look at intimacy. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. I go live each weekday morning here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page at 9 a.m. Eastern. And please check out all the other wonderful programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living and EWN One with the Earth. And I hope you'll join me again really soon. Again, such a pleasure and privilege to be with you.